that doesn't come from your pocket, doesn't come from your work. It's money that comes out of the operation of their services, which, and of course, that profit then can work in a couple of different ways. It can either be used to enable the bank to grow, to make more loans, to serve more of these interests like affordable housing, environmental cleanups, better schools, etc., that whole list. Or it can make a contribution to the state treasury. So if there's a shortfall, like 1.8 billion, the bank might just be able to say, okay, well, that's a dividend, because it's your bank. So it's these wonderful new opportunities that we have to not only cover our debts, but to start to plan to make a future that's not dependent on having to be borrowers. Okay? So that's the great breakthrough. Now, who's thinking of this? All over the United States, a lot of people are thinking about it. There are a couple of dozen cities, counties, and states that are now actively engaged in looking at this. And I'll just give you a kind of a quick survey of some of them. First, when we look, go from the East Coast on a state basis. Maine, New Hampshire has a current bill in play, fostered, by the way, by a Tea Party Republican. Also in Michigan, state representative there, launching that public banking initiative. In Vermont, where they've had a fight for a public bank, and the citizens won. Again, very interesting story, not unlike Greece, where the citizens voted. 20 out of 23 cities told the legislature, we want a state bank. The legislature said, you can't have it, but you will have. We'll give you 10% of our budget to invest locally. It was a plan that worked out not to the citizens' favor, but it did immediately made a difference. They took $10 million out of TD Bank, moved it into the state economy, and created a whole bunch of new jobs to the extent that the legislature didn't have a debate about it. They just renewed it this past year. But I'm happy to say that the people of Vermont are not taking this laying down. They are organizing once again to get to the State House and to take on the legislative process or engage it very directly. All right, so that's Vermont. New Hampshire, what's below that? Massachusetts, interesting story. A couple of years ago, 2010, the state bank bill came forward. The legislature created a committee. The committee was laden with bankers, and the bankers asked the Federal Reserve in Boston to make some comment on the proposal. They said, well, Massachusetts is not North Dakota, and we don't have, we have a more diverse economy, and there's plenty of money here to lend anyway. The banks are rich with money. We don't need to really have another bank. So they perceived it as competition, which of course is the way you would expect them to perceive it, and so they shot it down. That 5 years later, one of the people on that commission, one of the three who voted for it, is now leading the charge again with the legislature to create an infrastructure depository public bank because, and he was the president of a growth capital fund for the state. He talked to people around the state, the municipalities, and said, do you guys have trouble getting money for your projects? And about 60% of them said, yeah, we really can't get all the money that we need. We can't do water systems because the private capital doesn't like that so much. Their existing infrastructure bank in Massachusetts works with only highways, and only about 30% of the loans that are asked for are granted. So there's drive in the legislature there, as all over the country, to find a way to fund the change and the improvements in our infrastructure that must be addressed, that the private markets are not terribly interested in dealing with, for a number of reasons we don't need to go into. So Massachusetts is in play. We'll go down the coast. I'm going to move to New York. Has a new initiative last week for a state bank. Pennsylvania's governor is newly interested because they haven't signed a budget in 3 years. And they're $1.5 billion short this year again, and they're looking at creating new casinos in places where where there aren't always places for casinos. So they're looking to the people again, the people who play in that realm of getting more money out, dragging out the lint from the bottom of the pockets of the people who are trying to get a leg up in the economy and who gamble to try to do it. Describe it any way you like, but that is clearly the money is coming from the people in all of these instances to pay for the high debt costs, etc. I'm going to ignore New Jersey for just a moment. and go on down. Maryland has had a state bill. Michigan has a state bill. Illinois as well. Washington, D.C. just approved, the City Council just approved a $200,000 feasibility study to create a state bank there. It's very exciting to see how Congress will look at that, but God bless them, you know, they're on it. Also, down in Texas had looked at it, but they thought it was too socialist. There's a bill in the House in Arizona. The state treasurer in New Mexico is very interested in this, and the cities of Santa Fe and Albuquerque are both in the process. Actually, Santa Fe is very far along. They've already appointed a task force that is going to be looking at what the particulars are of what the bank would produce, what it would take for it to, how much it would cost to set it up, and then get into the chartering process. So they may, process-wise, be kind of the head of the pack. And then we go to California, a lot of things going on there that are kind of interesting. One of them is the idea of turning their infrastructure bank, which is a revolving fund, meaning that they've got a pile, they give some of it away, wait for it to come back, give it some more. Sometimes they'll incentivize that money in what they call leverage with other private money to try to expand their source of resources for what, they have a huge need for infrastructure there, and they don't have the money. This depository component would allow them to multiply it tenfold. So that iBanking is one. Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, Richmond, and Berkeley are all in line looking at this, as is Portland, Oregon, and of course we know here in Washington, the wonderful, persistent people here in Seattle, God bless you too, for staying on the case of making this, moving this thing forward. But I'll also let you know that Tacoma is in the process of looking at it too. In Colorado, Boulder and Longmont are very much getting closer to this. So it's very active. Now, I want to go back to
Hawaii.
Hawaii, yes. Well, where are they? Is that in America? Yes. So and Alaska also. So the considerations are broad, and the movement is engaging at a lot of different levels. In New Jersey, though, an interesting thing has happened, which has done more to not only validate and mainstream the public banking thing, but also to bring it into the mainstream of political thinking and of political reality. As candidates start to line up, and many of them are using public banking as a platform on which they are now winning elections. So the guy who is running in New Jersey would replace Chris Christie, who is probably the least liked governor, maybe in America. I got to tell you a little. I mean, you know Chris Christie, right? He's the guy who closed down the bridge for a political opponent. Well, the other day, it was July 4th. He hadn't come up with a settlement around. They didn't get to a budget settlement, so they closed all of the state parks. Everything shut down in the state on the 4th of July. And if you know, in New Jersey, you go down the shore to get cooled off in the water. You go down the shore. No one could go to the state parks. No one won't shut, except for Chris Christie, who was, you may have seen this photo. Chris and his family playing out on the beach, an island being staged for the state park. And one of the reporters got in a plane flying around it. So it was such a beautiful example of the complete disregard for public interest and the respect of the public need and desires. You know what I mean? This is who we're playing with, you know. Now we're making changes. I think we're all pretty much fired up about the need for this kind of participation, and it will take that kind of participation to move forward. Let's go back to New Jersey for just a minute. The basket case of financial situation of that state, which is a lot of money, it's broke. Ostensibly, it's broke. Pension fund is in the worst shape of any in the country. So to the rescue comes Goldman Sachs. Yeah, I know, I like that. That does have a certain funny ring to it. But how does that happen? It's coming to the rescue in the form of a fellow who is an alumnus of Goldman Sachs from 2003, who made money there, then became the head of the DNC Treasury business, became treasurer to Germany, ambassador to Germany for 4 years, and is now running for governor. And He is the likely next governor. He's got a 60% margin in the polls. But his name is Phil Murphy, and he has a working, poor background. He likes to say that our family was middle class on a good day. So his sentiments and his experience of living in the real world were not tainted by his experience in Goldman, and he's back to do public service. When we talked to him about a public bank, he got it. He said, "Oh, I have to look into that." And we started to meet, and he adopted it and created a platform in his candidacy. And now it's the buzz in New Jersey. What's this public bank thing? And the press has been very positive about it. And really, surprisingly so. And it's a strong platform for him to build a future for New Jersey. He said, "Look, last year we spent $1.5 billion building the infrastructure of tomorrow, roads and bridges and railways in Japan. That's where our money went last year. We're going to create a public bank in which we're going to keep the people's money in New Jersey, and we're going to invest here in ourselves." So, an unassailable logic, common sense. Keep your money at home, invest in yourself. People love it. And so I think that's going to happen. Now, the public bank supporters and movers in New Jersey, a group called Banking on New Jersey, it's great, I think, gives the people the impetus to align together through the various sectors of their interests, whether it's affordable housing, education, whatever, all coming together to support him and to support the legislative and to create the legislative environment for them. And let me just finish with one thing, because I'm going to wrap up here and we're going to have a question and answer. And I just wanted to say that when we did the session yesterday, I said, and they asked, well, who's ahead in this? And of course, I mentioned Santa Fe. And then I said, but I think maybe New Jersey is going to be really making this happen first. Now, it's a legislative process. A bill, as these senators will tell you, get knocked down a lot of ways along the way until there becomes the force of the people. But I have to say, at the end of yesterday, with 6 state senators and the heads of who were representing agencies of government who are seriously engaged in this, you have gotten to a new level here in Washington, which makes me think that this is a real working partnership, a real possibility for the state of Washington to have a public bank. You're in good hands. Let's stick together on this.
Thanks, Walt. So we're going to enter into a Q&A portion here. So I would like to invite one of my local public finance heroes, John Comerford, who has joined us. Maybe join the panel here. So just why don't we pull ourselves over here so people can see who we're asking questions of. Sorry, I don't have a modesty table there for you or anything. So I'm going to introduce Senator Chase to moderate the Q&A, but just a couple things about John Comerford. You know that he ran for the office of State Treasurer last November and was the highest vote-getting Democrat in the race. No.
Who's second? I was second.
Oh, were you second?
Yeah.
I thought you were the highest vote getter.
No, I wish I were, but
Wow.
the spoiler was
I wish.
At any rate, John had State Bank as a cornerstone within his platform. So John's resume is longer than from the tips of my fingers to the floor. He has worked for President Carter, who charged him with getting a bill passed in Congress, which he did, to create the National Consumer Cooperative Bank. And then, after he got Congress to pass it, became its founding president. So he has run a public bank, so to speak, from the federal level, but has also managed and been the CEO and president of other community banks and investment firm. He's a pension consultant now, and just knows the business inside and out. And I have the utmost respect for John. So he's joining the panel along with our other two experts, and I will hand it over to Senator Chase to please moderate. Are you okay?
Yeah. Thank you, Senator. How's it going? John, welcome. We're glad to see you here and have you join us. So, since most of us are veterans of the state banking wars here, I'm sure some of you have questions, so let's get right to it. Yes.
So my question is the following. It's the year 2017. We have one state bank in the country, and yet now there's this flurry of activity to consider this in a lot of other places, which obviously raises the question, what are the structural factors that are leading this to be considered so heavily now that weren't present, let's just say, 15 or 20 years ago? And as I've thought about that and listened to you, it seems like three are very salient to me. First is the mortgage-backed security crisis, participation in derivatives, et cetera, exposed a lot of problems in the banking system, so disillusionment with the banking system would seem to be one. A second, as sort of chronicled by The Economist last week, a lot of states around the country are having budgetary crises. Washington had one, Kansas, Illinois, a whole variety of other states. So perhaps seeking to save some money to address budget crises might be a second. And a third, it seems to me, might be insufficient attention to infrastructure needs. So I guess my question is, are those three valid, and is there more to it than that? Why is this getting so much attention in 2017, but not the year 2000, et cetera?
An area that you didn't mention and has become huge is income inequality. And I think Bernie brought this up in the campaign, that when you've got these CEOs receiving $100 million bonuses, he just brings in the amount of profitability that these banks are seeing. Right now, some of the largest dividend-paying stocks are bank stocks. They're paying 2 to 5% in dividends because they've got more capital than they need. So I think the area of income inequality, and people are saying this, even Republicans are saying it, that something's got to be done. So the idea of going back to the People's Bank is something that I think is taking root. Is populism. I mean, Trump has done great things for Bernie and Trump have both done, from different perspectives, great things for populism. So I think from a political standpoint is populism and income inequality.
Ellen, you want to?
Well, I was just going to mention that I think nobody really thought of it because the Bank of North Dakota intentionally kept a low profile, and that's pretty much how they got away with it for a century. I started writing about it, I only knew about it by accident because I had gone to a monetary reform conference, and it occurred to me that maybe we should own the banks, and I asked somebody, are there any public banks? And they said, well, there's one, but it's just an ordinary bank, they just run up. His idea was a bank should actually be issuing money. That was his big campaign. So anyway, so then I started writing about it, and I know that they've got kind of besieged with phone calls, and I'm not sure they're real pleased about all that. But they still kind of say, it's not our job to be coaching other people how to set up their banks. So.
I would just add to that, too, that it's a little like what we hear a lot around the country is, well, if this is such a great idea, why aren't there more of them? And the answer is, well, you have an 800-pound gorilla, which is Wall Street and those interests, which control everything. There's no more room. They don't want you to know anything about this. And so, and the way they can dominate the market is in the way a little bit like how the automotive industry dominated the LA street scene, where all the trains and nobody's talking about mass transit. You want to have cars, man. You need to have cars. I think that happened here in Washington too, right? So it's when an private industry dominates the field, the public interest is always subject to the benefits of private profit or profiteering.
John, let's say one more thing.
I just want to follow up, if I can, briefly on what Ellen said. I had an opportunity this week to speak several times with the CFO of the Bank of North Dakota, and they are ecstatic about helping a city of Seattle or any state and setting it up. In fact, their chair is on the board of the Federal Home Loan Bank. It serves both North Dakota and Seattle. And so that's a big thing, is to get into the Federal Home Loan Bank Board. And they have, one more thing if I can about the Federal Home Loan Bank Board, is one of the things that when I started looking at this closely, concerning was asset liability management. You have liabilities, deposits that are short term, and you have loans that are long term. And as a banker, that was always where I got in trouble with the regulators, is how do you match these assets up? Well, the Federal Home Loan Bank has what they call long-term fixed loans, advances. So you can go out 30 years, right now, at about 3.2% from the Federal Home Loan Bank, and borrow and make a loan at 3.5%, 3.6%, and still make money. So it's a great opportunity for us, and following up, the Bank of North Dakota is really, from an ideological standpoint, very interested in helping.
Oh, we're bringing
Well,
that.
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a policy wonk. Oh, okay. Hello? Yes, this works.
We didn't have that microphone.
Good question. I can't say I paid for this mic, but I have a question about the concept of counter-cyclical lending. Where does a public bank get the leverage to do that in a downturn, to lend more during a downturn?
Let's bring that up here.
Well, the publicly owned banks that it's just like the Chinese banks, they just issued a credit, like all banks do. And that is a good question. I mean, they've got the backing of, in North Dakota, technically they have the backing of the state. I don't know, that's a great question. Anybody know that? I mean,
Well, I'll give you North Dakota example.
Yep.
This year, for the first time in almost 10 years, they're actually making a dividend to the state. The state is in trouble financially because the oil industry is in such a decline. So they're actually granting $130 million to the state as a dividend. So the state doesn't have the same revenues they were having back several years ago, but they still have billions of dollars of revenues. And it's not just the state, it's every political subdivision. Don't forget what states have, what cities have, is the ability to tax.
Yeah.
So good times, bad times, that money's always coming in from the state. It may not be coming in the business sectors, but it's coming in property taxes, it's coming in income taxes, capital gains taxes, hopefully in the future,
We're working
here
on
in Washington State.
Martha?
Yes, I noted something on one of the slides about blockchain currency, and I have to admit that bothers me a little bit. It's like you're asserting that there is such a thing as a computer program that doesn't have any bugs.
I'm not an expert in blockchain, but my understanding is that the way blockchain works is you've got a block transaction here that goes to millions of computers around the world. It's a distributed network, so it doesn't go to one bank at the top. It's stored in all these millions of computers, and then that's a transaction that. So the money goes to somebody else, that becomes another block, and you can't change it. I mean, it's in millions of computers, so it won't compute. So if you try to go back and fiddle with it, or if you try to use this asset somewhere else, it just doesn't compute with all the other computers. I don't really understand all the details.
There's some really wild fluctuations in Bitcoin, right?
It's a ledger, it's not currency.
Yeah.
It's a ledger. It's just an underlying infrastructure. That block that Bitcoin uses, but it has nothing to do with Bitcoin.
Well, wallets exist on apps which run on smartphones, which are generally considered to be pretty insecure. Now, you might not be able to destroy Bitcoin transactions, but you can sure destroy the data that contains your Bitcoin, namely the wallet, if that wallet lets those Bitcoins out of safekeeping, you've lost the Bitcoins. They can be stolen just like
Goes
coins.
up in flames, it's gone up.
Yeah, right. It's not clear to me what they're.
So I have two questions, one for elected and one for anyone that else can answer. One question for Senator Asakawa and anyone else that can answer is, I understand you're able to ask for a formal opinion from the Attorney General on the constitutionality of a public bank. And that's something that Ellen brought up, is that there's been this question of, is this constitutional or not? And it'd be nice to probably just get that issue resolved one way or the other. So I encourage you guys, if you haven't done that, to do that. And then we'll thank you for doing it. And then the next question is, I have a hard time understanding how this is a partisan issue. When there's study after study that shows a savings and benefit to every level of government. Where is I don't understand the opposition, so if we can try and figure that out. Usually I can do a good job, but I just don't understand it.
Okay, I'll take that one on because this is what has led me to my current analysis of the body politic. I think to divide us as Democrats versus Republicans is the wrong way to describe politics right now. I think it's more like corporatists versus populists. So there are corporatists in both parties, and there are populists in both parties. It's just that I hate to use the word populist anymore because Trump has tried to say that he's a populist, so I think I prefer the word humanist. But that being said, I have gone and talked throughout the state trying to build awareness of this proposal for years now. And you know what's interesting is I'll go on to a farm tour because the farmers want us to, and when I'm out in eastern Washington talking to the farmers and throw this idea out, they say, wow, yeah, why aren't we doing that already? I've gone to Spokane and spoken to a Tea Party group. They'll say, yeah, why aren't we doing that already? So even the populists on the Republican side get it because they're libertarians who want independence from Wall Street and corporate domination, so they get it. So we built this alliance, actually, a bipartisan alliance. So if you notice, our current treasurer, Dwayne Davidson, is a friend of the Spokane County treasurer, who's a Tea Party guy. So he actually came to one of my presentations. So Dwayne has been open to this for some time. So we have that opening for creating a state bank, even with the current state treasurer, where we did not have it before with the Democratic state treasurer, who was one of the biggest obstacles we had to making progress for all these years. So nobody was happier than me to actually see him leave. But John Comerford has been working with Dwayne, and they've been talking, and so John is going to participate in this interim task force that I talked with you about, along with the new state treasurer, who is a Republican, and try and come up with recommendations for the 2018 legislature.
Bob, if I can just follow up on one point, I don't want to be talking too much, but the issue, the constitutional issue, is something that I've looked at pretty closely. And in fact, I just reread it when I was waiting. It's pretty clear that the courts have made a determination that the Constitution is not a problem. Because we've set it up, the Washington Development Finance Corporation, of which I'm a member, as is the treasurer. We make loans all the time, which would be in violation of the state constitution. Same thing with the Housing Finance Corporation. Same thing with the Educational Lending Corporation. So clearly it's not a constitutional issue, but you have to have specific reasons for making these loans, like job creation, housing creation, medical facility creation. And I think that's why the bank that we create, whether it's the city or the state, is going to have to be more of a niche bank than a general bank. It's going to have to fit niches that aren't being met currently. So I think from a constitutional standpoint, we don't really have a problem in the state. This was one of my opponents last year for treasurer kept saying, well, it's not constitutional. Well, it's not true. I mean, we have no problem with the Constitution as long as for a state purpose that ultimately would serve the low-income population.
Okay. We're at 1, 2, 3. Okay.
What prevents the public bank? What prevents the public bank from becoming politicized? One of the candidates in the measure says that it would be easier to disinvest, for example, if it was a public bank. So, in Wall Street, of course, greed is good, and they're supposed to make as much money as they possibly can. And it doesn't really matter if it's ethical. It's as long as it's legal, and sometimes if it's not. But what prevents a public bank from being politicized and doing things that really don't make money, but fit some political agenda?
Just offer that, of course, as I mentioned before, it's a big concern in New Jersey, but also in Philadelphia and everywhere else. At the outset of the bank, the people need to not only shape the mission, but design the architecture of the management, of the governance, and the management of the bank, so that it is removed. And we have a couple of scenarios, and I think if you look at North Dakota, you can see that there are ways, there are separations between who appoints the board of directors and how the management of the bank then is appointed but from the board of directors. And I don't think that the bankers, Eric's not a civil servant, is he? He may be, I don't know. But the idea would be to him not have a political appointee be in the places of authority for making loan decisions. The loan portfolio itself is designed inside a framework of authorized or chartered purpose. The board of directors then reviews that. And we're suggesting in these new discussions that a citizens advisory board, also stakeholders, also be included in the process. Really, even at the outset, as the bank is being shaped, that we have the stakeholder interests that represent the public, not just, of course, citizens, but also bankers and the Chamber of Commerce and the activists for environment and education. So you build them into the process of how this bank discovers its purpose and then stays on purpose. But you have put a couple of arm lengths of difference between the political and influence and cycles. So the board of directors, for example, could serve rotating terms rotate through the political cycles, so that whatever's going on in the State House or the City Hall is not directly connected. And then they, of course, would employ the management of the bank. Well, that's one formulation, and I'm sure there are several others that were possible.
The reason that the city's pension fund voted against divestiture of carbon companies the other day was one word: fiduciary. And it's become a much more broad term. Those of you who have followed what's going on in the investment industry realize that this was a big issue, whether in fact brokers would be required to act in the best interests of their clients as opposed to their own best interests. And that's the same thing that these board members on pension funds are feeling. I served on the investment advisory board for 5 years of the city's pension fund. And every time I would bring up the idea of divestiture, I was told, well, no, we've got study after study that shows when you do that, you lose returns. And you're hurting those people, those pensioners and future pensioners who are going to be dependent upon this money. Well, you know what? I say we take a vote. Let those members of the association of the pension fund vote, whether they want to or not.
There's also studies that conclude.
There are also studies too, but unfortunately right now the consultant who the city pays money to, the consultant who the city pays money to, has taken the position that it would be a violation of the fiduciary responsibilities to do that. And I think that's really important. Socially responsible investing is not new. It's been around for a long time. I used to work for Calvin Group, which was the sort of the parent of socially responsible investing in the U.S. back in the 80s. And we made cases, and we were able to get into cities and state governments with our argument that socially responsible investing is positive from both an economic standpoint and an environmental standpoint.
I would add too that there's something about this moment in our money consideration where we really look at what our money is. You know, our money is a relationship with each other. It is a means of conveyance of value and agreement and so forth. But it represents what we're committed to. And you know, as they say, budgets are moral documents. Our money should be also considered in those terms.
I think I can talk about it. I don't need a microphone, do I?
Yeah, use the microphone.
Well, I don't, can everyone hear me? Yeah. Okay. Part of the success of this is going to be how well it's marketed and PR. And one idea, and I tell you, I'm hugely a fan of this. I couldn't be more on board, but I'm less than enthralled so far how it's been marketed. One idea that you were talking, Senator, about showing how government works better, and one idea there are 137 government-run utilities in the 4-state region. And these aren't my numbers. This is NEA, which is the Northwest Energy Efficiency Association. And they, on average, beat the for-profits by 28% cheaper electric rates. And there's not a single person that talks about this. And I believe the guy in New Jersey, he was the mayor. He is.
Bill Murphy hasn't had elected office yet, but he's going to be the governor.
Well, there's a guy in New Jersey that was a Goldman Sachs guy,
Yeah.
who was he was a Democrat, but he was the only mayor. And this is the one when Christie went against for that Bridgegate thing.
Weinstein?
I think so. Weinstein that's not the guy you're talking about.
No, the guy's running for
governor?
For governor, it's Murphy.
Okay.
Bill Murphy.
So it's a different gentleman. I also happen to be blessed or cursed from coming from Wichita, Kansas, growing up from kindergarten. And for those that don't know, Wichita, Kansas has 9 billionaires when it was just 150,000 people. And 4 of those billionaires are the Koch brothers. They had a big breakup, but I see Charles being in favor of this. However, the machinery that he set up has taught people how to attack things like this. And, well, Charles won't attack it. My belief is he won't attack it. There are plenty of other people to do it. And the first place that I would go to is I would go to North Dakota, and I would make sure I got people put in that North Dakota bank that they could blow up. So
is that your question?
Well, the question is, I guess these are more just comments that I would be curious, everybody to be aware of that. So,
Thanks, interesting thought.
Okay. Another question? Yes.
I kind of have two questions. The motivating thing for the populism that might be around having a bank might also be the fact that we're steering so much money into the war effort. And 100 years ago, in 1917, all your populism died after 1917. And so maybe a lot of us are getting this sort of chilling effect, and maybe we need to have populism to finally happen. But my real question this year is, the women's movement essentially died out in 1917. That was progressing quite heavily. But how did North Dakota do during the World War II? Did it survive that cataclysm? And then the other question is also, some people have been working about an initiative, and I don't know if you know, we had an income tax passed in Seattle, and it was done by a personal initiative, and where we all signed a little card. We didn't go with a formal initiative, but maybe you guys could comment on what would be a good approach, and maybe following right behind that income tax. It might be good for us to all plow into together into an initiative of that same format.
Which one of you wishes to discuss World War II and?
Well, I would just offer that, North Dakota, I think, came out okay because they weren't invaded. So I think they worked out okay. But the bank, and John, you would probably know more about this, but in 1916, that's when the Bank of North Dakota started, 1919, in the populist movement. People uprising, saying, we know we're being had. You can't pull, we've had it. We're going to sweep you guys out and sweep in new people. This is a good democratic process, but they were shortly after turned over to Republican interests that all of us were trying to blow up the bank, as you suggested. But they realized that after they took office, that they had a bank. They realized, hey, this could be a really good thing. So the cycle of, and during the Depression, that bank was able to forestall foreclosures on farms and others. So they took an activist role in preserving the community. Now we might make reference to the Sparkassen Bank in Germany, the Sparkassen banks in Germany, where there are 15,000 of them. I mean, there are lots of them. But these banks are local savings banks, local banks that only serve their region. And when the banker gets engaged with you as a client, they help you succeed. They make sure that their loans perform. They follow through. So there's a very personal engagement, an investment in your well-being and in your success. So it's not just another client that we're going to, and that's the way the Bank of North Dakota has worked through the years, typically. Now I think that they didn't really start to leverage their banking power until the 80s or 90s, when they really started to take a much more progressive use of that franchise.
Just, I think, historically, the Bank of North Dakota was an agricultural bank. And it existed prior to what we call the Bank for Cooperatives now, which is the Farm Credit System, which was a Roosevelt-era product that created opportunities for farmers to borrow at lower costs from the federal government. So this was an agricultural bank that over time became a commercial and an industrial bank. It met needs, but the initial need it met was agriculture. I would argue that the need right now in this city is affordable housing. And that should be our niche. And I know Bob has talked extensively about how, in fact, the Seattle Municipal Bank could be the leverage pin for a significant increase in the number of units of affordable housing in the city.
How about an initiative? How about an initiative?
Issue, you want to comment about initiative?
I think the initiative is to vote for Bob Hasagawa for mayor. That's the initiative.
For nonpartisan, non-campaign meeting. On an initiative, I've had a lot of questions about that because there has been so much stonewalling happening in the legislature. People are just kind of fed up with it. I think we should get through the next legislature. Let's get the task force meeting this interim. Let's get a set of recommendations together. Let's see if we can get something done for the 2018 legislature.
Build a coalition.
Pardon me?
Build a coalition.
Coalition, that's the only way. And if not then that gives us 2 years to lead up to the 2018 election. Plenty of time to craft the initiative so that it meets everybody's needs or objectives or overcomes objections.
You mean the 2020 election?
2020. Yeah, it falls in a presidential year, which should be a very populous year to work turnout, so that would maximize our chances for passing something. I know it's down the road, but believe me, if we thought that when corporations like Costco can buy a privatization initiative to privatize our entire liquor system for $21 million, how much do you think the banks are going to throw? Banks are an order of magnitude greater than the corporations, so they do not want something like this to happen. The campaign against it would be humongous, so we had better go in with our eyes open when we're planning something like that.
Can I just say one thing on that? I don't think anyone should be afraid of an initiative, really. We can win initiatives. We absolutely can. Might lose sometimes, once in a while we lose one, but we win. It doesn't take a lot of money. And so we have the opportunity here, and I think we are going to have to go to the people. I really do. I'm prepared for that. But we also have the single payer initiative. We're going to have to go to the people on both of these issues. So we can do this. We absolutely can do it. So that your comment about building the coalition is right on. We have to build a very strong coalition on these issues. And just get ready to do it. We can do that. Yes?
John Brown gave us a good idea about how the bank can capitalize itself at the start. I'd like to hear from John Comerford what his ideas are on finding the core capital for Washington State Bank.
Yeah, initially I looked at the possibility of a revenue bond that would be similar to what Ellen had suggested. But it would be maybe privately placed with foundations and organizations that have what they call program-related investments. So that was one idea, and it would have a return probably less than 5% because it would be tax-free if individuals wanted to participate in that as well. But then I talked, after talking with an unnamed state senator running for mayor, I talked at length to the city about what funds they might have available. And they said that a mayor who was determined to do this with a council that would be supportive could reappropriate funds that are in the reserve. And there's, I think, $1.47 billion that the city has. So you could theoretically take $100 million of that. You don't take it day one because you're not going to have assets of $1 billion day one. So, but over a 5-year period, you could take that $100 million and ultimately leverage $1 billion from it, and it could probably do it without hurting any existing programs. So the answer is, and you wouldn't have to pay for it. I mean, it's already there, so you wouldn't have to pay for it. You'd have no cost of capital. As a banker, and as someone who's been involved intimately with regulators, they don't like to see any kind of encumbrance on capital. They like to see it totally at risk. So if you were even to pay it out, and I did some work years and years ago, back in the 80s, on what was called subordinated debentures, and ultimately the Federal Home Loan Bank Board said you couldn't use subordinated debentures to count as what they call as Class 1 capital. So we had to do away with those. But I think that the money is available within the city, and a mayor who was committed to this, and a council who was committed to it, can do it.
I'd like to ask a question. John, one of the prospects for a public bank is serving the cannabis industry. They talk about free deposits. What's your take on how that might function?
You know, in a perfect world, it would be great, but there are a couple of issues. One is that we're not going to have deposit insurance. So if you were to take private deposits, you basically are putting, as they do in North Dakota, the full faith and credit of the state or the city behind those deposits. I don't think that's going to happen.
What if you did get FDIC insurance now?
And one of the things that I've talked about in the past is buying a small bank that has existing FDIC insurance. The regulatory structure today, I'm going to sound like a Republican, is so difficult to probably be able to do the cannabis business in a that kind of regulatory environment.
What about a credit union?
The credit union is the same thing. They're highly regulated. I don't know too many credit unions today that aren't subject to federal regulation, the National Credit Union Administration. There were a lot of state regulated credit unions, and I don't know whether there are anymore. I think some of these community development banks might have state regulation, and that might be the way to go in terms of the cannabis industry, where you don't have to worry about interstate issues. But the answer is, I don't want to confuse this issue with the cannabis issue. In a perfect world, yeah, it would be wonderful. But you're going to unfortunately find people that are saying, hey, I'm not going to support that. But if you're talking about using public deposits for a public purpose, i.e. low-income affordable housing, building community health centers, putting infrastructure in place, schools, but one of the issues that Ellen brought up is that in this state, one of the reasons we can't build schools is we're up against a bond ceiling. Well, there's no reason why we couldn't use this bank to build schools within Seattle and privately place that debt as tax-free for a school. And there's all kinds of things you can do, but I'm sort of hesitant to A, get into the cannabis business, and B, try to get deposit insurance. North Dakota doesn't have it, and they do fine without it.
Bob,
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question if you don't mind. So yesterday, just for y'all's information, we had a very fascinating, what would you call it, a forum yesterday, where we had Ellen explaining kind of the background, well, Ellen and Walt were both there, but we also had 6 senators there who we have now formed a Senate Public Banking Caucus within the Senate. Can you imagine that? So, yeah, it's women-driven. Those women, boy, you get them on them. Anyway, so Senator Wellman, Senator Kudrer, Senator Chase, Senator Saldana, myself, and Senator McCoy. Kaiser was not part of this. She was there in attendance. So at any rate, we had invited public entities. The Port of Seattle was there. The Treasurer's Office was there. A city council member from Tacoma was there. Representative of Public Utilities, I think. Public Works Assistance Account was there. So it was a fascinating conversation, but there was also